Gather round, friends, and lend an ear to the embers of the unexplained. Percy Hawthorne here, your guide to the dusty archives of the extraordinary. Tonight's file, pulled from the shelves marked Bayou Incursion, carries the damp chill of Louisiana swamps and the unsettling hum of something deeply, profoundly other. Settle in. Pour yourself something strong. You might need it. The air over the Terrebonne Parish bayou hung thick and wet, a living blanket that muffled sound and pressed down on the soul. Cypress knees rose like the gnarled fingers of drowned giants from the tea-colored water, draped in curtains of Spanish moss that swayed with secrets whispered on the sluggish breeze. It was a place of profound silence and sudden violence, where history bled into the present. Gabriel Sterling stood knee-deep in the muck, his eyes closed, his breathing deliberately slow. He wasn't just listening, he was feeling. The swamp spoke to him in a language older than words. The tremor of a gator sliding off a mud bank, the frantic pulse of a rabbit fleeing a hidden predator, the slow, deep groan of ancient wood settling. But beneath these familiar rhythms thrummed something discordant, a vibration that set his teeth on edge and made the fine hairs on his arms prickle. It wasn't sound, exactly, more like a pressure, a subtle warping of the air itself, pulling at the iron in his blood, a magnetic distortion, intensifying as they pushed deeper into the labyrinthine waterways. "Getting stronger," Gabriel murmured, his voice a low rasp barely audible over the drone of insects. He opened his eyes, scanning the oppressive green gloom, his gaze, sharp and analytical beneath a fringe of dark, rain-dampened hair, missed nothing. The unnatural stillness and a patch of water lilies, the frantic flight of birds away from a specific stand of towering cypress ahead. This way. In the shallow draft pirogue behind him, Milo Hart shifted nervously, his usual manic energy subdued by the oppressive atmosphere. He clutched a thermos like a talisman, the scent of strong coffee a fragile anchor in the miasma of decay and ozone. Stronger? Great. Just peachy. Because what this charming vacation spot needed was more ominous vibes. Milo's photographic memory cataloged every twisted root, every ripple, every flicker of light that wasn't firefly or phosphorescence. His gut, however, screamed a different story, a primal, cosmic intuition that felt like ice water trickling down his spine. "Gabe, my internal runaway screaming alarm is hitting 11, and that's before the weird lights start playing peek boo." The weird lights. That was why they were here, knee-deep in primordial soup. Loggers from a nearby operation had vanished, not uncommon in the treacherous bayou, perhaps, but the stories preceding their disappearance were. Tales of shimmering orbs, blue, white, and cold, dancing through the cypress maze at night, luring men off the marked paths. Whispers of voices on the wind, speaking in tongues that chilled the blood. And the final straw, frantic radio calls about devil spirits, and the earth swallowing them whole, abruptly cut off. Scientific horizons, ever vigilant for the truly bizarre, had dispatched their best cryptologic consultant and his uniquely chaotic partner. Gabriel pulled the pirogue forward with quiet strength. "The lights are lure," he stated, his empathy brushing against a residual fear clinging to the water near where the last logger's boat was found abandoned. It tasted metallic, sharp, laced with confusion, and a terror that went beyond mere physical danger. Deliberate. Something wants attention. Or bait. He paused, his hand hovering over the water's surface. A deeper echo resonated, older, infinitely more painful. A collective scream of defiance and despair, etched into the very mud. 1811, the German coast uprising. This land remembered blood. The militia? Milo snorted, the sound jarringly loud. "Oh, they're hunting all right. Boudreaux's boys. Convince it's voodoo demons or Yankee spies with fancy gadgets. They got shotguns, bad attitudes, and enough shine in them to fuel a rocket. Saw their trucks near the old Du Bois landing an hour back. They're sweeping the eastern channels." He tapped his temple. "Photographic recall, remember? Saw their maps. They're heading this way." Gabriel's jaw tightened. Boudreaux's militia were a volatile cocktail of superstition, moonshine, and itchy trigger fingers. An encounter wouldn't end well for anyone, especially not for two outsiders poking around where men had vanished. We need a distraction. Something loud, chaotic, something that fits their narrative. A slow, mischievous grin spread across Milo's face, momentarily banishing the fear in his eyes. It was the grin that preceded either brilliant improvisation or spectacular disaster. Usually both. Loud? Chaotic? Fits the devil spirit's vibe? Say no more, Professor. I speak fluent Bayou bogeyman. He began rummaging frantically in his oversized, multi-pocketed vest, pulling out an astonishing array of items. A handful of road flares, a small, dented brass bell, a pouch of pungent herbs, mostly sage and oregano, but the militia wouldn't know the difference. A small Bluetooth speaker, and a truly hideous rubber chicken mask. Just need, He triumphantly produced a battered MP3 player loaded with obscure sound effects. Got some prime demonic ritual ambience on here. Chains rattling, creepy chanting, the works. Courtesy of my Alien Hunter Meetup fundraiser haunted house gig last October. Paid for 3 months of coffee. Gabriel raised an eyebrow, a flicker of reluctant amusement touching his lips. A rubber chicken mask, Milo? Really? Symbolism, Gabe? Pure symbolism. And unexpected. Throws him off balance. Milo was already clambering onto a relatively dry hummock, arranging his props with the frantic energy of a one-man stage crew preparing for opening night. Get going, find the source. I'll give Boudreaux's finest performance they won't forget. Aim for 15 minutes of glorious confusion, then meet you at the big lightning-struck cypress, the one that looks like it's given the finger to the sky. 10 minutes, Gabriel countered, already pushing off. Be careful, Milo. They shoot first. Careful is my middle name. Milo called after him, pulling the rubber chicken mask over his head. His voice was muffled but undeterred. Well, actually it's Bartholomew, but careful sounds better. Now shoo. Let the maestro work. Gabriel pulled away swiftly, the discordant magnetic pull intensifying with every yard. He left Milo arranging his bizarre tableau, the rubber chicken mask bobbing grotesquely under the moss-draped branches. Soon, the first unnerving strains of synthesized Gregorian chant mixed with rattling chains and low, guttural moans echoed through the swamp, amplified surprisingly well by the little speaker. Milo, hidden in the shadows, began ringing the brass bell with rhythmic fervor, occasionally tossing a lit flare into a stagnant pool, sending up gouts of hissing steam and lurid red light. He interspersed this with loud, dramatic pronouncements in a garbled mix of faux Latin and Cajun French, punctuated by the rubber chicken's inherent absurdity. Avant, ye spectral vermin. Par la puissance de, Saint Chicken, regard as le fou. It was ridiculous. It was utterly, gloriously distracting, and from the sudden shouts of alarm and crashing through the undergrowth back towards Milo's position, it was working perfectly. Gabriel allowed himself a fleeting moment of gratitude for his partner's unique brand of chaos before plunging deeper into the silent, oppressive heart of the cypress maze. The distortion wasn't just a pull now. It was a physical pressure, making his ears pop and his vision swim. The air tasted metallic, charged. The usual sounds of the swamp had vanished, replaced by an unnatural silence broken only by the thrum, a deep, resonant vibration he felt in his bones, emanating from the waterlogged earth itself. He followed the pull, navigating by a sense deeper than sight, pushing through curtains of moss that clung like cold, wet cobwebs. He reached a small, stagnant lagoon, almost perfectly circular, choked with duckweed. The water here shimmered with an unnatural, oily sheen. And at the center, the distortion was strongest, focused on a spot where the water seemed darker, not just deep but absent. A void. Gabriel grounded the pirogue and stepped onto a thick, half-submerged root. He knelt, placing his palm flat on the dark, peaty soil. He closed his eyes, lowering his mental shields. The empathic onslaught was immediate and staggering. Agony. Not human. Alien. A searing, collective consciousness screaming in silent terror. Trapped. Buried. Panic like liquid nitrogen flooding his veins. Cold intellect. Calculating. Hungry. Probing the pain. Feeding on the terror. A hive mind, vast and ancient, submerged in suffocating darkness. It sensed him, Older echoes, the thunder of muskets, the clash of steel, the desperate cries of men and women fighting for freedom against impossible odds. The ground drinking their blood, their fury, their despair. The hive had slumbered then, perhaps stirred by the violence, the raw emotional energy, and now awakening, starving. The loggers, their fear had been a beacon, their life force sustenance. The lights, fishing lures cast into the psychic darkness. Gabriel gasped, wrenching his hand back as it burned. His heart hammered against his ribs. It wasn't just aliens. It was a predator, buried deep beneath the Bayou floor, feeding on terror and life force, using the tragic history of this place as a psychic amplifier. It was waking up, drawn to the surface by recent fear and disruption. The loggers weren't just vanished. They were consumed. A crashing through the undergrowth, and Milo's slightly breathless voice broke the horrific reverie. "Gabe, you okay? You look like you saw a ghost. Or, the inside of a particularly upsetting alien stomach." He stumbled into the clearing, the rubber chicken mask askew, a smear of mud on his cheek. "Work like a charm. Boudreaux's boys are currently arguing about whether Saint Chicken is a legit protective saint or a sign of the apocalypse. Bought us maybe 5 minutes before they regroup. Find the disco ball?" Gabriel pointed a shaking finger towards a dark spot in the center of the lagoon. "Below us. A hive. Ancient. Buried deep. It's feeding. On fear. On life force. The loggers, they're gone, Milo. Consumed." Milo's grin vanished, replaced by stark horror. He stared at the dark water, his cosmic intuition screaming confirmation. Feeding? Like psychic vampires? Great. Just cosmic horror great. He shivered, wrapping his arms around himself. Okay. So, big nasty bug queen buried under mud. Why now? Why the light show? "It's trapped," Gabriel said, forcing his analytical mind to engage to the lingering empathic horror. "Buried by some cataclysm millennia ago. It's been dormant, barely surviving. But the energy, the violence here, the pain, especially 1811, it seeped down, stirred it, weak signals. Then the loggers, their machinery, their fear, it was like ringing a dinner bell. The lights are probes, lures. It's trying to draw more prey, more energy, enough to break free." "Break free?" Milo's voice was a squeak. "Out of the mud? Onto land? Into New Orleans for Beignet? Gabe, we cannot let Cajun Cthulhu go brunching." "No," Gabriel agreed, his voice grim. "We can't." He scanned the lagoon, his cryptologic mind searching for patterns, weaknesses. The magnetic distortion pulsed strongest from the center void. The distortion, it's a byproduct of its energy field. Its attempts to reach out, like a beacon, but also a shield, or perhaps a containment field it generated when it was buried. It feels self-sustaining, but stress. He noticed subtle patterns in the duckweed, concentric ripples emanating from the center, disturbed not by wind or creatures, but by the subsurface energy. It's vulnerable when it projects the lights, when it feeds. The field fluctuates. Milo followed his gaze, his photographic memory overlaying the ripples. Fluctuates like a weak spot? Okay, Professor, how we poke it. Preferably with something very, very pointy and explodey. He started patting his vest again. "Got, 3 road flares left? Some questionable jerky? My lucky rabbit's foot? Not feeling super weaponized here." Before Gabriel could answer, the swamp erupted, not with militia, but with light. Dozens of those cold, blue-white orbs bloomed silently from the dark center of the lagoon, rising like malignant bubbles. They hovered, casting eerie, shifting illumination across the cypress and moss, painting the scene in stark, monochromatic relief. The humming intensified, vibrating the water, making the very air shimmer. Gabriel staggered, overwhelmed by the sudden psychic onslaught, a wave of alien need, desperate and ravenous, mixed with chillingly cold calculation. It wasn't just projecting light. It was broadcasting hunger on a frequency that scraped against his soul. Milo cried out, clapping his hands over his ears, though the sound was psychic, not physical. "Oh, sweet mother weird. It's the dinner gong. It knows we're here. Shouts echoed through the trees, closer now. Boudreaux's militia, drawn by the sudden intense light show. Less few follets, less esprits diable. Over here, gunfire cracked, wild and panicked, bullets whining through the branches overhead. Chaos. Perfect, deadly chaos. The hive pulsed with predatory interest, sensing the fresh wave of human fear. The lights drifted towards the sounds of the militia. We need to draw it back. Gabriel yelled over the psychic hum and the approaching gunfire. Focus its attention, its energy, back to the source. Milo, pale but eyes wide with a desperate kind of inspiration, understood. Distraction was his gift. He ripped off the rubber chicken mask. Right. Big Nasty wants a show? Let's give it a show it can't ignore. Hit it with the feels, Gabe. I'll handle the razzle-dazzle. He fumbled for the MP3 player, scrolling frantically. Forget demonic chanting. Time for the grand finale. He cranked the volume. Instead of spooky sounds, the swamp was suddenly filled with the raucous, brassy blare of New Orleans Second Line Parade. Trumpets, trombones, the insistent beat of a bass drum. It was utterly incongruous, explosively loud, and vibrantly, defiantly alive. Milo grabbed the remaining flares, lighting them one after another, hurling them in high arcs around the perimeter of the lagoon. They hissed and spat, casting wildly dancing red light, creating a garish, flickering circus ring. Then Milo Hart, improv comic, part-time barista, and fundraiser for alien hunters, started a dance. It wasn't graceful. It was pure, unadulterated energy, jumping, spinning, waving his arms like a deranged marionette, shouting along to the imaginary parade. Hey, Big Ugly. Yeah, you. Under the mud. Check this out. This is what you're missing. Life. Noise. Stupid, glorious, messy life. You hungry? Eat this. He poured every ounce of his chaotic, resilient, utterly human spirit into performance, a beacon of defiant vitality against the cold, consuming hunger of the hive. It worked. The drifting lights paused, then slowly, deliberately, began to coalesce, turning away from the confused shouts of militia and focusing their cold radiance on the lone, dancing figure in the flickering red light. The psychic hum shifted, sharpening with intense, predatory focus. The pressure on Gabriel intensified, the alien mind fixated on Milo's vibrant, terrifyingly exposed energy. Now, Gabriel thought, dropping to his knees at the water's edge. He didn't just feel the hive's hunger. He dove into it, guided by his empathic sense. But he didn't offer his own fear. Instead, he focused on the deep, resonant echoes still vibrating in the land, amplified by the hive's own predatory awakening. He channeled the raw, unyielding fury of the 1811 revolt, the courage, the desperate, sacrificial no screamed into the face of oppression, the collective will that refused to be consumed. He pushed that energy, that ancient human defiance, not as sustenance, but as a psychic spear, directly down into the point of maximum distortion, the heart of the hungry void beneath the lagoon. The effect was catastrophic. For the hive, sustained by terror, the sudden, overwhelming surge of pure, fiery defiance was poison, alien and incomprehensible. A psychic shockwave erupted from the dark center of the lagoon. The water didn't just ripple, it boiled, churning violently as if a giant hand were stirring it from below. The hovering lights winked out instantly, plunging the scene back into near darkness broken only by Milo's dying flares. The deep, resonant hum rose to a shrieking, ultrasonic keen that felt like needles driving into Gabriel's skull. The magnetic distortion flared wildly, twisting perception, making the cypress trees seem to bend and warp. Milo was thrown off his feet by the psychic backlash, landing hard in the mud, the second-line music cutting off abruptly. Gabriel gasped, clutching his head, blood trickling from his nose. The connection had been brutal, a feedback loop of alien agony and human fury. The earth groaned. A deep, seismic shudder ran through the bayou. From the center of the lagoon, thick, viscous mud bubbled up violently. Not water, but dark, oily sludge smelling of ozone and decay. Tendrils of something that wasn't quite smoke, more like solidified shadow, writhed momentarily above the surface before collapsing back into the churning muck. The psychic scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a profound, echoing silence that felt heavier than before. The intense magnetic pressure vanished, leaving only the familiar, oppressive damp of the swamp. The militia's shouts had stopped, replaced by terrified whispers and the sound of men crashing away through the undergrowth, thoroughly spooked. Gabriel crawled to Milo, who was groaning, spitting out mud. "Milo, talk to me." Milo blinked up at him, dazed. Did we win? Also, did I break my tailbone? Feels like I broke my tailbone. He managed a weak grin. The razzle-dazzle good? The razzle-dazzle was perfect, Gabriel said, helping him sit up. He looked toward the lagoon. The bubbling sludge was subsiding, leaving a foul-smelling scum on the surface. The dark void was gone. The oppressive presence was gone. He probed cautiously with his empathy. Only silence, deep, exhausted silence, and pain. Immense, ancient pain, but contained, quiescent. The defiance had forced it back, shattered its feeding probes, overwhelmed its nascent consciousness. It wasn't dead, but it was deeply wounded, thrust back into its suffocating prison, its connection to the surface severed. For now, it's contained, Gabriel breathed, the word heavy with relief and lingering horror. Buried again, deep. Milo shivered, looking at the now calm, foul-smelling water. Contained, right. So, we just pissed off a giant, psychic mud-dwelling nightmare and put it back in its box, with a history lesson and a jazz parade. He looked at Gabriel, his usual humor replaced by stark seriousness. That box gonna hold Gabe? Gabriel stared into the dark water, feeling the deep, wounded throb of the alien presence far below. It was dormant again, but the taste of its hunger, its alien intellect, was seared into his memory. The bayou floor felt thinner. "I don't know, Milo," he admitted quietly, the weight of the unknown settling on his shoulders. "I truly don't know, but we bought it time, and us time to warn the right people." He helped Milo to his feet. "Let's get out of this swamp. I need coffee, and a very long shower." They limped back toward the pirogue, leaving the silent, scarred lagoon behind. The swamp slowly reclaimed its familiar sounds, the chirp of frogs, the buzz of insects, the distant cry of a night heron. But beneath it all, Gabriel Sterling felt the deep, wounded silence of the earth, a ledger entry marked with a question mark, a predator buried, but not slain, and the haunting knowledge that some lights in the dark should never, ever be followed. And so, the ledger on this particular strangeness closes, for now. Remember, the world hums with more mysteries and answers. Some sleep beneath our feet, dreaming hungry dreams in the dark. Keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and perhaps carry a spare coffee for a friend. You never know when you might need to dance in the face of the abyss. This is Percy Hawthorne, reminding you, the archive is never truly complete. Good night.